The night before the Yidden left Mitzrayim, they had a mitzvah to eat a korban Pesach along with matzah. But in regards to this matzah, we find something very surprising. That is, as far as the matzah that's going to be a mitzvah in future generations to eat, the pasuk says, Shivas yomim toichel olav matzos, lechem oini, ki v'chipazon yatzosem eretz Mitzrayim. We need to eat matzah, lechem oini, poor bread, because we have left Mitzrayim in a haste. What does it mean, poor bread? We learn out from here that the matzah needs to be lechem oini. That means poor bread, meaning made only of flour and water, as opposed to matzah ashira. Matzah ashira would mean matzah that's made with other things such as wine, oil, etc. Now, this is true regarding the future celebrations of Pesach. However, in regards to the matzah they ate in Mitzrayim, nothing of the sort is mentioned, which makes it sound like they were able to be yotzeh that first original Pesach with matzah ashira. Now, when the Yidden left Mitzrayim the following day, and were told that their dough didn't rise, at that point it was definitely lechem oini, it was only flour and water. Which leads us to say that on the one hand, in the future Pesach of future generations, it's only lechem oini, flour and water. In Mitzrayim itself, we have a difference. When they're leaving Mitzrayim, it's lechem oini, but the matzah they have while still being in Mitzrayim the night before was able to be matzah ashira. We need to understand why is that, and what's the significance of this. Another thing says the Rebbe, from the fact that while they were in Mitzrayim, they were allowed to technically have matzah ashira, there needs to be something in future generations, something similar to this. In fact, says the Rebbe, the Mordechai tells us that at the time of the Beis HaMikdash, they ate the full meal, including eating matzah ashira, before starting the Seder part of it with the lechem oini, with the ordinary matzah. Similarly, says the Rebbe, these days, although on the night of Pesach we only have lechem oini, the regular ordinary matzah, on Erev Pesach, although we're not allowed to eat matzah, but we are allowed to eat matzah ashira. In other words, we see over here that in the preparation for Pesach, there is some room for having matzah ashira. The Rebbe says, in regards to eating lechem oini, the pasuk gives us the reason, because we left Mitzrayim in haste. Now, when the pasuk says lechem oini, first of all, it means, of course, that we should be eating matzah rather than chametz, but also lechem oini means that it shouldn't be matzah ashira. In other words, when the pasuk says ki b'chipazon, because you left in haste, is a reason both for not eating chametz, but also for not having matzah ashira. So we need to understand why is it that ki b'chipazon, because we left in haste, is a reason also for not having matzah ashira. The Rebbe says from this same pasuk, we also learn that the dough that we use, the mixture that we use, needs to be from ingredients that can actually become chametzdik, and we need to watch it and guard it that it shouldn't become chametzdik. So in other words, ki b'chipazon yotzasa, because we left in haste, is also a reason, not only for not having matzah ashira, but also for the fact that we can't use things that automatically would not become chametz. Which tells us that there must be a connection between these two things, that as a result of ki b'chipazon, we can't have these two issues with matzah. Neither matzah ashira or matzah that wouldn't become chametzdik. And here we see something very interesting, that on the one hand, in future generations, there is going to be both of these things in our matzah, but in the original Pesach Mitzrayim, that first night, so on the one hand, we said before they could have matzah ashira, but there was still the idea that the ingredients they used had to be the kind that could have become chametzdik, and that's why they're being told to make sure that it should not become chametzdik. So we need to understand the significance, again, of why it is that in future generations these two things are linked. We can't have neither matzah ashira, or we also can't have a dough that wouldn't naturally become chametzdik, whereas in Pesach Mitzrayim, these two things did not necessarily go together. You could have matzah ashira, but you could also have, and you cannot have a dough that would naturally not become chametz. It has to be able to become chametzdik, and we guard it not to become chametz. The Rebbe says the explanation of all of this can be understood based on the explanation al pi pnimi yisonyanim, according to Chassidus, the difference between lechem oini and matzah ashira. Lechem oini, which is only flour and water. Now, water doesn't have taste and give taste into the dough. Represents Kabbalah soil. When you're doing something without the understanding, without the geschmack, you don't have your seichel and midos involved. On the other hand, matzah ashira, which has the wine or oil, etc., is things that give a geschmack, give a nice flavor and a taste. In Avodah, this is the idea of serving Hashem with our seichel, with our understanding. We appreciate what we're doing. Now, when a person is serving Hashem only with Kabbalah soil, as far as his seichel and midas, his intellect and emotion, there is still some room for evil to exist, because he didn't eradicate it completely. As far as his understanding goes, there is still room for some of these negative things. He's only not doing it because of Kabbalah soil. He's forcing himself. This is the avodah which we call iskafia. On the other hand, when a person is serving Hashem with his understanding, with his feelings, with his emotions, with his enjoyment, then that negates completely the idea of evil, and this is what we call ishapcha, complete transformation. Says the Rebbe, now we can understand the connection between the two things. We say matzah ashira, and the concept of things not being able to become chametzik. That means, when a person's avodah is in a way of matzah ashira, meaning he has his seichel and in midos fully involved, they fully appreciate his avodas Hashem, his Torah and mitzvahs, then automatically it also can become chametzik. There's no room for any evil, for any ra. Just like simply, usually matzah ashira, things made with juices, if there's no water involved, wouldn't become chametz. But when the avodah is in a way of lechem oini, meaning it's being done purely just with Kabbalah soil, then there's also some room for ra, for klipa. You didn't eradicate it completely. You're just doing it just because you have to, but you don't have the appreciation in your seichel and midos. And that's why we need to guard the matzahs, that they shouldn't become chametznik. Says the Rebbe, generally these two ideas, iskafia and ishapcha, is also the difference between Yetzias Mitzrayim and the future Gula. By Yetzias Mitzrayim, we're told that the Yidden had to run away. Why? Because the evil, the bad, the klipa was still strong, and they needed to run away from the tumah of Mitzrayim. That's also the idea of lechem oini. That's why they had lechem oini, because it's the one that represents the Kabbalah soil, only doing it in a way of iskafia, without the flavor, without the taste. On the other hand, Geula HaSida, when Mashiach comes, we are told it's not going to be in haste and a rush. The Ruach HaTumah Hashem is going to remove from the world. This is ishapcha, complete transformation, like matzah ashira. And that's why we asked before, why kibechi pazim, because you left in haste, why is that a reason for lechem oini? Now it's very much understood. Because the rad, because the evil is still going very, very strong, that is exactly why that the avoida then is lechem oini. In other words, the avoida of iskafia. Now says the Rebbe, the reason why we have lechem oini is not only because it's similar to Yetzias Mitzrayim, which at that time they ran away, but the Rebbe says in truth there's a certain advantage in this avoida of iskafia, because that's more connected with a person's own avoida, his own effort, his own toil. That means in his hapcha, yes, it's true, the person is becoming one with Hashem. He's not even shayich. There's no ability for ra, for anything evil. But it's specifically in iskafia where the emphasis is on the concept of bittul, that he's doing against what he feels like doing himself just to do what Hashem wants. In fact, says the Rebbe, this is one of the reasons why even when Mashiach comes, we're going to mention Yetzias Mitzrayim, so that we have both advantages together. On the one hand, the ishapcha, the transformation that happens when Mashiach comes when there's no tumah, but there's also that advantage, always remembering this concept of bittul. The Rebbe says, based on a teaching of the Alter Rebbe, really all the matters of the Geula HaSida started already by the Geula of Mitzrayim. In Avodah, what that means is that what's giving us the koyach to be able to have the iskafia at the time of Yetzias Mitzrayim is because immediately, right at Yetzias Mitzrayim, we know already there's going to be eventually the Geula HaSida, the complete transformation of evil, is hapcha. Now, here's the question. How is it that by Yetzias Mitzrayim you can already feel and tune in a little bit to this is hapcha? Seemingly, there's still the ra, there's still this war that has to go on. You can seemingly only be holding at the level of Kabbalah soil. Says the Rebbe, because even Kabbalah soil itself could be done in a way that's not absolutely forced, but rather that even your seichel and your midas appreciate that you need to have the inyan of Kabbalah soil. In other words, you can have the idea of Kabbalah soil, the main avodah is Kabbalah soil, but even that with some sort of geschmack, some sort of appreciation. Says the Rebbe, now we can understand, going back to the matzah they ate in Mitzrayim. The matzah they ate in Mitzrayim, on the one hand we said it could have been matzah ashira. On the other hand, we say it still is the kind of matzah that needs to be protected, that it shouldn't become chametzik. That means, because on the one hand, there's already somewhat of the geschmack, like matzah ashira, but at the same time, the main avoid is a kabbalas oil avoida. The kabbalas oil itself should be with some sort of appreciation. But because it's mainly still kabbalas oil, you're still dealing with a situation where there is bad. That's why it's the kind of dough that needs to be protected, that it shouldn't become chametzik. Says the Rebbe, this idea that you could have the geschmack involved even while you're having kabbalas oil, that's only the night before they go out of Mitzrayim. But once they're going out of Mitzrayim, we say the emphasis is specifically lechem oini. Why is that? Because at this moment, the time of Yetzias Mitzrayim, this is really where the Yidden are accepting upon themselves the kingdom of Hashem. Kabbalas oil malchusay. And that's why this is specifically the time where there needs to be the lechem oini, which is the absolute bittul, complete submission to Hashem.